Well, there is a cast of thousands here today at La Trobe University at the Bundoora Sports Park, but there's a wonderful reason for that, for so many people and for the two codes of rugby and football. Today is a massive announcement, and I just want to acknowledge Minister for Major Events, Sports, Tourism, Martin Pakula, Minister for Women, Gabrielle Williams. We've got John Dewar, who's the Vice-Chancellor, former Premier John Brumby, who's the Chancellor at La Trobe University, and all of the representatives from Football Australia, Football Victoria, Rugby Victoria, all the players and all the kids. So I think that's all the acknowledgements. A lot of people here, but it is a wonderful announcement. Today it's a significant pre-budget announcement. Next Thursday there will be $101.1 million in our budget, coupled with the $15 million from the federal government. This will deliver a brand new purpose-built home for the Matildas, and it will also deliver a dedicated home training base for Rugby Victoria and the Melbourne Rebels Super W team as well. So this is just massive. For football, it will mean a marquee pitch, a grandstand, 4 other pitches, high performance facilities, gym, water, rehab, medical, meeting spaces. This will be the home for the Matildas and for those elite pathways. Elite pathways, particularly for girls through Football Victoria, so their high performance program will be based here in Bundoora, as well as the junior Matildas, the young Matildas and the Matildas themselves. In all, across all the national teams, around 6,000 hours per year, and that includes 140 days that the Matildas will be here at their home base. This is incredibly exciting, and it's not just for elite football. There's also going to be discounts for community use of these brand new facilities, as well as 20 hours a week, for around 20 hours a week for students here at La Trobe Uni as well. So the students on campus will get a benefit. And as I mentioned, for rugby, a dedicated home for the Super W team, the Victorian Rugby Centre. This will be where the Super W team train and play, which is incredibly exciting. When we say we're serious about increasing the visibility of female participation in elite sport, this is what we mean. This is what we mean, and this is the investment that we need to make. We've seen, in terms of participation in these two codes, a doubling of female players in club football over the last 5 years, a doubling of participation. For female participation in rugby, a trebling of participation. So more girls are getting active in these two codes, massive participation sports, and this will mean a training base, a home, dedicated purpose-built facilities and a partnership. And I want to thank La Trobe University, 15 hectares of sporting facilities, and it just stamps again the fact that Melbourne, Victoria is the centre of sport in this country and in the Southern Hemisphere. I might hand over to Marty to say a few words, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, James. Well, look, this is a very exciting moment. In a couple of years' time, the Women's World Cup will be played here in Australia and New Zealand, and I think for players like Jenna, the opportunity to have a training base here at La Trobe while they prepare for that World Cup is very exciting. This is a testament to a lot of really hard work by a lot of people, and a lot of persistence and a lot of great advocacy. Kimon and Peter and Antonella on behalf of football, Paul Doherty and the team in regards to rugby, and of course John Dewar and everybody here at La Trobe University. This has been an enormous effort over a long period of time, and Gabrielle and I are really excited about the fact that rugby and football will have a great home here at La Trobe University. I spoke to Hamish McLennan, the Chair of Rugby Australia, just yesterday to say, if you want an indication of how serious Victoria is about the Rugby World Cup in 2027, have a look at what we're going to do tomorrow. If you want an indication of how serious we are about supporting our women in the lead up to the Football World Cup in 2023, have a look at what we're doing here tomorrow. And this is really a very exciting opportunity because the facilities here will be second to none, whether it's for young Matildas, whether it's for the Pacifica community who are growing their involvement in rugby, doubling that over the last decade, and I think they'll double it again very soon. Whether it's the community here or the students at La Trobe, these are going to be extraordinary facilities. The pitches, the grandstands, the gymnasium, the administrative centres, the high performance facilities. This will be an absolute hub for football and for rugby, and it will mean that the next generation of young players will have better facilities than anyone has ever had. And it'll be a really important cornerstone of our effort to grow those sports over the coming decades. So I want to thank Football Victoria, Rugby Victoria, La Trobe University, and the national bodies of those codes as well for all of the incredible advocacy over a long period of time, and indeed the Commonwealth as well for their support. This has been a long time coming. This is going to be a magnificent facility, and it will support these sports for decades into the future.
Excellent. Happy to answer any questions.
How long has this been in the works?
Well, I might get Marty to talk to that, but this has been in the works for quite some time, and as Marty indicated, a real driver of this has been the 2023 Football World Cup. So Australia, New Zealand. So we've been in discussions with Football Australia, Football Victoria for quite some time, but I might hand over to Marty, who's been leading the charge from the government as our Sports Minister.
Well, look, all I can say about that is I became Minister for Tourism, Sport and Major Events 2.5 years ago, and I think Peter Filopoulos called me on about my second day. So I think it's been quite some time. Of course, the Commonwealth committed $15 million a bit over a year ago, but that investment was only going to be catalysed if the Victorian Government made this significant contribution. So it's probably been 2 or 3 years, particularly from the football point of view. The conversations with rugby have been probably over the last 18 months. But we really formed the view that once we identified La Trobe as the precinct, we had a great opportunity to kill two birds with one stone and to make sure we had great facilities for two codes, not just one. And that's what's so exciting about this announcement. We don't have to, we don't have to come back and later find an opportunity for Rugby Australia. We can build magnificent facilities for both codes and at this incredible venue.
Are any of the World Cup games actually going to be played here, or is this just the training?
I know the World Cup games themselves won't be played here. The World Cup games will be played at Amy Park. But we would see this as a great opportunity for the Matildas to have this as a training venue whilst they're playing their games here in Melbourne.
Is the master plan all good to go? We just haven't seen, or we personally haven't seen one yet.
Oh, look, I'm sure there'll be an opportunity for the big reveal of the master plan, but we provided $1.5 million in last year's budget for all that master planning work, and that's very well advanced, so much so that we'll be able to get shovels in the ground this year.
What do you imagine will be the economic impact of having a facility like this?
Look, that's always hard to quantify. Certainly in the immediate term, there'll be, dozens, probably 60-odd people involved in construction. So there's 60 jobs that will come from this in the immediate sense. But certainly when you think about, this local region, you'll have players from all over Melbourne who will come here to La Trobe to train. You'll have administration facilities for both football and rugby, so there'll be more permanent jobs here on site. So for this local region, the economic impact, I think, will be significant.
Do you think something like this will help attract more international events?
Oh, absolutely. Look, we in terms of the attraction of international events, one of the key things is being able to demonstrate that you've got appropriate facilities for people to train whilst they're participating. But you've also got to give the sports themselves the opportunity to grow, and that's what having these sort of world-class facilities enables them to do.
Does it take some pressure off? Is a lot of money. How are you going to measure return on investment?
Well, look, we've made significant investments in a whole range of sports over the years, whether it's been the work that we did at the Junction Oval for cricket, the work that we're doing at Marvel Stadium for AFL. We've made, the home of golf at Sandringham. We've made substantial investments, and it's not always about mere economic return. It's about the ability to get young people involved in sport and the opportunity to perform at the highest level. I made the point earlier that the greatest growth in rugby, for instance, is amongst Pacifica communities, and to have these kinds of facilities, when the code has grown from sort of 11,000 participants to 20,000 in the last 9 or 10 years, that's an intangible that's very hard to measure in strict economic terms, because you're talking about people's involvement in elite sport, health and welfare. These things are all incredibly valuable, and not every investment in sporting infrastructure is about a direct economic return.
Do you foresee other sports moving out to places like this to take some pressure off Gosh's Paddock and increasing?
Well, look, I mean, Gosh's Paddock is different. It's used by the Storm and the Melbourne Football Club, and it's primarily because of its proximity to Amy Park and the MCG. So it's not necessarily moving well away from that central sporting precinct is not necessarily appropriate for every club or every code, but I think this is an important step for football and for rugby, and we'll continue to speak to the users of Amy Park and the surrounding areas about what opportunities are available for them.
Can you speak to actually coming to watch games here in future? Obviously not the World Cup, but there are going to be grandstands and stuff.
Yeah, and there'll be competition standard pitches here as well. So at the moment for rugby, for example, there's one internationally accredited pitch in Melbourne, Amy Park. This will be the second, and it will create the opportunity for spectators and high quality games to be played out here.
And one day those girls and boys behind you might be playing there?
Well, let's ask them. Would you like to play professional football one day, girls? Yes. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Mind if we ask you some other questions?
Sure.
First of all, just on the COVID front, we can't track Mikeys that aren't registered. What's going on there? Sure, we can do better than
Well,
that.
we're encouraging people to register their Mikeys. It's a very easy thing for people to do. Just jump online and register your Mikey, and it's another way that we can assist our contact tracers if we need to. So it's something that we do encourage people to do.
Firefighters want backdated pay. Are you aware of this, and where are we at?
Look, I'm aware that these matters are before the Fair Work Commission, which is the appropriate pathway for these things to be nutted out and resolved, and that's where it's at the moment.
Just on the India flights, Qantas is investigating reports that essentially the labs in India that declared some Australians who are stranded there as COVID positive. Apparently they had their licence suspended just a couple of months ago. Were you aware of this? And was the Victorian Government also aware that if someone tests positive to COVID, they wouldn't be allowed to come back with the repatriation flights?
Yeah, we put in place very strict, or National Cabinet through the federal government put in place very strict processes in terms of getting people back, particularly vulnerable Australians and permanent residents in India. And the states and territories, we all agreed that we'll take those repat flights. So Victoria's up for a repat flight, as are other jurisdictions. And we put in place very strict processes in terms of testing prior to people coming onto the flight and travelling back to Australia. So they'll be supported in India by the federal government, and anyone who returns a positive test doesn't jump on the plane to come back, but is supported in India for that time.
What kind of support is being provided? Because those people obviously can't go back to their, where they were living across state borders.
And that'll be the responsibility of our officials, Australian officials in India, supporting any citizen or permanent resident who was scheduled to jump on a flight, on a repat flight, but if they test positive, then they remain in India and are supported by Australian officials in India.
Given the, worsening situation in India where, lack of ventilators, lack of oxygen, hospitals that are overrun, is it appropriate for us to completely strand those who have tested positive and are in an even worse position?
Oh, look, we've got to take action as per the public health advice. We That's what we do. We respond to the best advice. The best advice is the safest way to both support vulnerable Australians and permanent residents in India and make sure that we've got all the safety precautions before, during and after those flights, is that we have very rigorous testing before people jump on the plane, and if they are positive, then it is the responsibility of Australian officials to support those individuals. That's the advice that we've received, and that's the action that we've taken.
There are a number of Australians who are positively identified as being positive, negatively identified, as being COVID positive. Do you know if any of them are Victorian residents?
Negatively identified as returning positive.
Wrongly identified. Sorry,
Okay.
the lab that was processing in India had negatively identified them as COVID.
I don't have those details tonight, but I'm happy to come back to you.
Just on the budget, the property industry says that the land/stamp duty tax hike will worsen housing affordability. What's your response to that?
Look, I don't think that's the case, and the Treasurer spoke extensively to this yesterday. You know, the pandemic has asked all of us to focus on the things that matter, and the government is no different. Everyone's been forced to focus on matters that matter. We are no different, and that's reflected in the fact that we so significantly invested in our health system, in our public health team, through the pandemic, and that continues to do so to this day. Invest heavily in the economic recovery, which we did in the November budget, and we will do again in the budget next week. You've got to make these choices to keep our community safe and to ensure that our recovery is as strong as it can possibly be. And to do that, that requires government to identify areas where we can reprioritise funding to health, to education, to mental health and to other services. And it also requires us to identify in a very, very targeted way people that can do a bit more within our progressive tax system, and that's what the Treasurer outlined yesterday. We've got a proud record. We've made cuts to stamp duty last November. We've supported first home buyers over the last several years, and that has seen a significant number, around 135 or so first home buyers enter into the market with the changes that we've made. So I don't agree with that characterisation. These are very, very targeted measures so we can invest in the services that people need. We are not out of this pandemic. We had an extraordinary budget last year, and you can see in the federal budget that they just handed down. We need to make choices about where we invest, and that's in the services that people need.
Do you accept that the land tax will likely be passed on to renters, though, whether it be personal or business?
No, I don't necessarily accept that. These are very, very targeted measures. They're appropriate, responsible measures in extraordinary times. We need to make choices. We need to focus on the things that matter, just like every other individual. Governments are no different, and that means investing in public health. It means investing in economic recovery.
Is this an appropriate time to be raising taxes?
What the Treasurer outlined yesterday and what will be reflected in the budget next Thursday is a very, very responsible approach to the things that we need to do. We've been living with this pandemic for the last 15 or 16 months. We are not out of it, and we need to continue to support the services Victorians need in health, in mental health, in education and other vital services, family violence, child protection. We need to invest in those services, make sure that we deliver budget repair. These are very responsible measures, and that's reflected in the very targeted changes that the Treasurer announced yesterday.
Almost every major infrastructure project, I'm thinking about Metro Tunnel, the Westgate Tunnel, they've all been over budget and also unable to be, on occasion, delivered on time. Is the raises in tax, I guess, in response to those infrastructure projects that have been blown out?
No, it's not in response to our infrastructure projects, and we'll have all the details of those projects outlined in the budget next week. These are infrastructure projects that our state desperately needs, and we make no apology for Victoria's big build. These are transformational projects, whether it's Metro Tunnel, whether it's the North East Link, whether it's the incredible level crossing program over the last 6 or 7 years, we make no apologies for these investments. They are delivering transformational change in communities and in the economic vitality of our state.
How badly has COVID contributed to those blowouts? Obviously, we'll find out on Thursday, but is it significant?
Oh, look, like all infrastructure projects, I'm in charge of, our school building program. My brother's in the residential building industry. Like everyone in construction has been impacted in some way through COVID. Whether that's through lockdowns, whether it's around global supply of materials, like everyone's been impacted. We'll go through detail all of our infrastructure projects, but we make no apology for delivering on every single thing that we promised over the last 2 elections and delivering the biggest infrastructure program that this state has ever seen, creating tens and tens of thousands of jobs in the process.
What do you think about Brett Sutton's comments that we need to get to a stage where essentially COVID's just kind of running in the community, but there's enough people vaccinated that we don't need to keep locking things down while we do get out of it?
It's what I've been saying repeatedly, what the Health Minister's been saying. We're able to move towards COVID normal. We're getting there, step by step. But it's always dependent on the success of the rollout of the Commonwealth's vaccine program, the efficacy of the vaccine in terms of transmission, and in making sure that we have an alternative quarantine hub. We need to roll out, most importantly, the Commonwealth's vaccine program. That's why I'm really pleased that from Monday we'll open it up to under 50s for Pfizer for those eligible cohorts. We need more, we can do more. Our state sites can deliver 2 to 3 times the amount that we're doing at the moment, but it's all dependent on supply of the vaccine from the Commonwealth. But the Chief Health Officer is absolutely right. Once we can get to a point where the vaccine has been successfully rolled out to a large extent, then we can start making further changes. But it's always dependent on public health advice, the success of the Commonwealth's vaccine program, and having an alternative to hotel quarantine.
What would be considered enough people vaccinated?
That's not a question I can answer. It's a question for the public health team, and it goes to the amount of the vaccine that's been rolled out, the number of citizens that have been vaccinated, but it also goes to the efficacy of the vaccine itself in terms of transmission of the virus. And we have seen some pretty positive evidence coming out of UK and other parts of the world in terms of the higher the rate of the vaccine, the lower the level of transmission in the community.
And Mr. Molyneux, did Brett Sutton sign off on Victoria's plans to start accepting international students into the state again when it was formally submitted to the federal government?
Look, the proposal that we have put to the federal government, it meets the criteria that the Commonwealth have set. That is separate from hotel quarantine, industry pays. We've done all of the things that the Commonwealth have asked, and yes, that proposal has gone through public health.
And do you have any updates on whether or not the government has approved those plans yet?
Not as yet. Nothing confirmed from the Commonwealth. There was some discussions. There's ongoing discussions every day, but there were meetings that were held on Friday between state officials and Commonwealth officials. I'm hopeful of a positive outcome, both in terms of our proposal for an alternative quarantine hub, and secondly, our proposal for a small proportion of flights coming in for economic cohorts.
And it seems now like Queensland and New South Wales have both had those sort of discussions as well with the government, but has Victoria as well, are we on the same playing field, I guess?
Well, we were the first ones to put a proposal directly to the Commonwealth. I understand other states are also looking at what they can provide for economic cohorts. So we're all asking the Commonwealth the same thing. We need to focus on getting vulnerable Australians and permanent residents home, but we also need a small proportion, whether it's international students, whether it's film crews, whether it's other skilled migrants that we need to have a small proportion to allow them to come into the country. The ball is in the Commonwealth's court on this matter.
Just to bring it back to the vaccines for a moment,
for.
Sorry, for the under 50s, the eligible.
Yeah, we're in a good space. We're open. We're encouraging under 50s who are part of that eligible cohort. So these are people in critical industries, defence, emergency services, meat and seafood processing, disability workers. So if you're part of those eligible cohorts and you're under 50, please call, make an appointment. We've got the Pfizers for you to provide that vaccine.
Have you personally spoken to the Labor MP who's being investigated for having sex in his office at Parliament House?
No, I haven't.
Is there any reason why you haven't?
We'll get together with caucus next week for budget day and then sitting weeks beyond. I just haven't spoken to that individual over the last few days.
Do you think it's appropriate?
Do I think what's appropriate, Samaya?
His conduct, having sex in his office at Parliament House?
Absolutely not. The conduct was inappropriate. It doesn't reflect community values. Concerns were raised with the Speaker. I understand the Speaker dealt with that issue. More importantly, beyond this single issue, which is of deep concern and doesn't reflect values, and I would expect that individual reflects on that behaviour. But more importantly, in terms of the change that we want to see, there's critical work that the presiding officers are doing in regards to conduct of members of Parliament. That work, as I understand it, is almost finalised. It will be responded to by the government, and that will see some broader change in terms of how we deal with those issues, and I think that's a good thing.
Are we getting a bonk ban? Are we getting a bonk ban?
Look, I'm not going to guess what the presiding officer's work, what that will entail. There's been consultation across parties within the Parliament. That work is almost finalised. I look forward to that work. We need to always look at how we can do things better and how we can ensure appropriate behaviour of MPs in the Parliament.
Can I just ask Mr. Williams
Of course you can.
a question? Minister for the Women's hat on. The federal government was heavily criticised last year for not having a budget that focused heavily on women, but come out with some women's policies. This time round, are you happy with the results of the federal budget?
Look, we're always happy to see the federal government focused on these issues that the Victorian Government has had clearly in the centre of our frame for many, many years now. So look, I'm eagerly awaiting the detail of many of the commitments that they've made, but of course we're always happy to see investments in key areas, particularly in both prevention and response and family violence, but at this point the detail is rather thin, so I'll reserve my full judgment until I can see that detail.
And how much further will Victoria go in terms of, I guess, funding programs and funding initiatives specifically for women and targeted to women?
Look, programs targeted to women have always been a key feature of our investment, whether that be, and it should be noted too, that's across government, that's whole of government investment. Obviously my portfolios in women and prevention of family violence have a key focus on women, but I think the key part of our focus on gender equality here in the Andrews Labor government is that it is reflected in every portfolio area, and that is a lens applied to every portfolio area in our investments across government.
Just on this announcement today, is this the single biggest investment in women's sport from the Victorian Government?
Look, Minister Pakula might be able to answer that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. What I can tell you though is that sport, and particularly elite sport, is such a powerful vehicle for cultural change. It allows us to break down gender stereotypes, it allows us to challenge those discriminatory attitudes that we know lead to bad outcomes for women. And so to have an investment like this that targets elite facilities for women's sport, football, or soccer as some may call it, and rugby, really is an incredible opportunity for us. And more than that, when we tell women and girls that their sport matters, what we're actually telling them is that they matter. And that's a really important component of today's announcement.
Do you think there's still issues out there? I don't know if you heard, but the Canberra Raiders coach on TV said that if he couldn't have a good conversation with his players, then he might as well coach netball. Do you think that that's still an issue out there, particularly in society at the moment?
Oh, look, these attitudes are pervasive in all corners of our community, and that's the great shame. And I think the work that we've been embarking upon here in Victoria and the national and cultural conversation that we're having across our community is really focused on changing those attitudes in every corner of our community, whether that be on the sporting pitch, whether that be indeed in homes, whether that be in bars or on the street or in workplaces. We're looking to challenge those attitudes everywhere, because that's the only way we will achieve meaningful change and better outcomes in terms of gender equality across our community.
Well done.
Beautiful, thank you.
Did you know whether it was the
In regards to biggest single, look, I'd say as a single investment, the answer would be yes. There's been obviously long-term funding arrangements for things like female-friendly change rooms and, of course, the various AFLW investments. But as a single investment, I think this would be the biggest in women's sport that we've had in Victoria.
proud of that?
Absolutely. Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.